Thanks for coming, and as Meredith said, I'm the New York-based East Coast editor for the Tasting Panel and the Quaff Report and the SOMM Journal. Mike Madrigal is my team captain. He's been with us from the beginning on the Quaff Report, which to our knowledge is the only somm to somm blind tasting feature in the industry. We publish in every issue. We blind taste 15 wines, evaluate them, have a conversation, and have a lot of fun about them. I'm going to ask our panelists, whom I thank for joining us today. I'm going to ask everybody, with the exception of Mike, to introduce themselves. I'm going to introduce Mike, and then we're going to get rolling.
My name is Paul Coker. I'm the Sommelier Mike Madrigal Tavern at St. Regis Monarch Beach, Orange County, California.
Hi everyone, I'm Noreen Zaim, and I'm over at Smoke Oil Salt in Los Angeles.
Hello, I'm Dario Salem, and I own Wineworks Consulting Services, and I'm based in between Vegas and LA on my way to Hong Kong.
I am Jared Hooper. I'm down at Faith and Flower in downtown Los Angeles.
And hello, I'm Terrence Levy. I'm a sommelier at Spago from Beverly Hills.
Hello everyone, my name is Augustus Miller. I'm the former wine director from Charlie Palmer's restaurant in Costa Mesa.
Great, and I just realized, being from New York, I talk really fast, so after listening to you all from the West Coast, I'm going to slow down a little bit. In New York, Mike Madrigal needs no introduction. He is the head sommelier of Bar Boulud and Boulud Sud. He was the Sommelier of the Year by Wine Enthusiast and Food and Wine magazine in 2012. Mike has a deep background working in Burgundy as both a harvest hand and conducting wine tours. What am I leaving out?
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we'll just start with the wines. And Mike, I'd like to talk a little bit about his wine program in New York, and then we can go on.
Great, thanks, Lana.
Let me just make a quick announcement. As you can see, we're having some issues connecting to the internet for some reason. So Lana is going to be tweeting from the Quaff Report. And so if you guys want to pull it up on Twitter feed on your phones, you can follow along there. I'll hope to get it up as soon as possible, though. Just so you can see a live feed of some commentary that we're going to be sharing.
Right, and we'll be doing that under Quaff Report at Quaff Report.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for coming to watch us taste wine. I hope it's interesting for you. And I wish you could be drinking with us, but this is something that is going to be an educational experience, I think, for all of us here, and hopefully you'll also get something out of it. But my name is Michael Madrigal, and I am a sommelier in New York City for a French chef named Daniel Boulud. I'm the wine director for 3 of his programs. One is called Bar Boulud, the other is called Boulud Sud, and the other is called the Épicerie Boulud, which is kind of like an oyster bar bakery type place. And I buy all the wines for those 3 places, and each of the programs are very different. They're, pretty much French wine-based wine lists. Bar Boulud is like the charcuterie, and I call it French soul food style of cuisine, where there's coq au vin and really old school French recipes that come from Burgundy and the Rhone Valley, and those wine regions are represented as well, pretty much solely on that wine list. The other restaurant is called Boulud Sud, which is a Mediterranean-based restaurant. So it's cuisine from the entire Mediterranean basin, from Spain to the Middle East. And there's a lot of interesting spices and flavors, so I find myself really challenged to find wines that work with those type of dishes, and it's great. And I'm a wine lover first and foremost, and I'm always curious about wine and what good wine is, and no matter where it comes from, I'm always looking for that quality. And I find the best way to find quality is to get all of your preconceived ideas and throw them out. And that's why blind tasting is so important, because it levels the playing field for wine. You could have a $10 wine next to a $1,000 wine, and oftentimes you'll like the $10 wine better. And that's part of what this idea is. You know, we just want to taste on the merits of the wine, not how good looking the label is, and not how heavy the bottle is, and all of those things. Or not that it comes from the most prestigious appellation or made from the most prestigious winemaking team. It's just solely on the quality. And, you know, that's a thing that I do all the time at the restaurant. And this is loosely based, the way we taste is loosely based on what I do every week at the restaurant, is when I do a blind tasting. And what usually happens for me is the wine world, at least in New York City, has become so big. And there's so many people involved. There's so many distributors and salesmen and winemakers coming into town. And they just don't leave you alone. They, like you guys know, from emails to people dropping in, you're just like, I have to do my job. Leave me alone. And there comes a point where you can't just say that to everyone, because you need to be tasting all the time. And you need to provide the best wines on the wine list for your guest. So there came a point in my career, or in my position at the restaurant, where I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. These people are often asking me to taste their wines, and then I'm trying to teach my staff about wine. You know, the staff training thing is such a huge part of being a sommelier in a restaurant. You need to train the staff, from the busboys to the chefs to everyone. So I said, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to have the reps bring me in wine and have them wrapped in aluminum foil, number them from 1 to 10, and you're going to come in and we're going to taste my entire staff, and not just the sommelier staff, but the busboys and the waiters and anyone who wants to sit in. And it became something so fun, and in that it's the type of tasting where I'm not telling you what to taste, you're tasting on your own. And if you don't want to say anything, if you have nothing to add, then just stand back and listen. And this is kind of what we're doing today. We're all going to taste, and if no one has something, if there's nothing to be said, then don't say it. If you have something to say, then say it. You know, just tell us how you feel, tell us what you taste, and tell us if you like it or not. I mean, we're not trying to find aromas of freshly cut garden hose or things like that. We are just tasting the wine on its merits. And I guess without further ado, we're going to get started tasting. So thank you all for coming. These are all Cabernets, as far as I know. I wasn't told what they are. I have a feeling there might be some wines from Paso Robles in there, but again, I don't know. But all I do know is that they're Cabernet. So we're going to get started on the first wine. Everybody, we're going from the left. So give us a couple, minutes or so. We're going to taste through, and then we'll start talking.
While we're waiting, I just thought I might update you a little bit on the evolution of the SOMM Journal. As you know, the tasting panel has been around. It's going into its 9th year. It reaches over 90,000 industry professionals 11 times a year. A little over a year ago, I found out that the old Sommelier Journal went out of business. It was the underground cult magazine run by a man named David Vogels. And he ran another magazine called the Orthodontics Journal, which was a success for him, but he couldn't seem to manage to get the Sommelier Journal going. So I made an offer to him when it went out of business to buy the name. I trademarked the Sommelier Journal and also revamped it as the SOMM Journal. And he didn't have a lot of circulation left, so we built it, offered it free to the trade instead of subscription. And we're up to over 65,000 subscribers nationwide and growing very quickly. Which, I'm going to bring back that, well, just filling time here, but the new magazine, if you go to thecleverroot.com, www.thecleverroot.com, you'll see our latest venture, which will be chef-focused. We also will be tying in wines because wine is such a big part of food. But as you all know, the marijuana industry is growing rapidly, and there is no smart voice for the industry. So I know there's a lot of writers out here. We will be looking for food and lifestyle writers. You can also send information at info@sommjournal.com, info@thecleverroot.com. Okay.
Okay. Is everyone ready? Augustus, you look like you want to talk. You want to start? Sure. You mind?
This is a delicious wine. Yeah. There's a lot of complexity beyond fruit. For myself, I got a lot of herbs. There's this acidic, kind of sharp aftertaste in this wine, which tells me there might be a lot of Cabernet Franc in this wine. There's definitely an earthy aspect, like an organic turned earth. For me, I think this wine is from a cool climate. It's trying to feel the alcohol in my throat, and it's just not that warm in my throat, which tells me it's sort of a moderate plus alcohol. I think it's a Cabernet Franc, mainly Cabernet Sauvignon blend from a moderate climate.
Do you have any idea where you think it's from? If you had to guess.
If I had to guess, Bordeaux, left bank.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
I like the wine a lot as well. I think the acidity is the thing that made me like the wine most, because it did have that freshness that a lot of times with Cabernet you don't get so often. Sometimes Cabernet at its, is not so great, is heavy, and this didn't have heaviness. It had full flavor. It wasn't oaky. It had a savory element to it. It wasn't just fruit, like you said, but the acidity really kept it coming. I mean, okay.
Pass the mic, please. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh yeah, I forgot we're recording, so I have to do this. But I agree with you. It's the acidity on this wine that I thought was the most interesting thing. And, the savory flavors outside of the fruit. There was a dustiness to it, too. It was not overripe. And it wasn't oaky. I mean, the oak integration was great. Anybody else?
I think kind of across the board, something that we tend to see in Cabernet predominantly based wines is much heavier use of oak. And none of these are really screaming oak. I think across the board, they all kind of celebrate the fruit itself more than what's been done in the winery. To me, this one, and one thing that always, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but New World versus Old World, and I think you used to say who's winning that battle between fruit and earth. To me, there's such fruity wines coming out of the Old World now and such restrained styles coming from the New World. To me, it's where does it get more ripe or less ripe on the palate? It's almost like more of a shapes thing. And this wine does branch out a little bit on the palate. So I think I would go New World on it because that fruit, that tart current kind of becomes a little bit more fleshy onto the palate.
So we have New World, Old World. I think it's Old World. I got old. You have old too? I'll be trying to pass it on. Do you want to pass this on, Mike? You guys can keep that one.
I definitely got Old World on this one. I think, well, first of all, I'm convinced that somebody's been switching my glasses around because these have changed for me so much. I mean, we all politely waited. I didn't. I ran right up and started nosing through. Yeah. And so I've really been able to see these open up a little bit. There's been a lot of changing going on, I think, in these glasses. Number one for me was Bordeaux. Of the bunch, that's the one that really showed Bordeaux to me. And then getting in and tasting it, I think that was confirmed. Mm-hmm. Sort of from my feeling. 10 is a really cool, interesting vintage out of Bordeaux and many places in the world. I think this one is showing very well right now. I have another wine here that I think might also be from Bordeaux that I have a feeling is really already starting to put on its winter coat and go to sleep. But this one I think right now is showing very well.
And would you guys buy the wine for the wine list that you buy for? Yeah? Yeah. I think I would too.
Thumbs up.
And if this is New World, I'm very impressed, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And this is not the typical New World style that I'm used to. This is a well put together New World style, if it is New World.
Yeah. I agree. I think, and it's interesting because you can see attributes of the wine that showcase profiles that could be Old World, you know, quintessentially, or that ripeness that is there as well. But it's interesting in looking at my notes and so on. I talk about the balance in this wine being really prevalent. It's got a little bit of those savory qualities that have been mentioned. It's definitely have the earth and mineral all the way through to the core, through to the mid palate and to the finish. Little ripe for sure in the alcohol on the finish. So, but then again, if it is 2010 Bordeaux, it's riper vintage. That would explain that. But I find that it's made in a little bit more of that traditional style, meaning that it's not like overly polymerized or overproduced. In terms of the tannin structure, the tannin and the minerality really comes through all the way through the finish, and it has a little bit what I call lift, that freshness, so to speak, with the ripeness and in harmony. And there's just a lot of different components going on in the flavor. So I find the wine to be really, really quite good and drinking pretty well right now. I mean, obviously it's age-worthy, but for what it is, yeah.
Yeah, I feel it's Old World. I think it's a Bordeaux because I haven't actually tasted any of them yet except this one, but. Yeah, that's how we're supposed to do it, right? Okay. He's cheating. Yeah, I think it just has a lot of brightness. The fruit's very bright. It's still very tart. I think it is showing well, but I feel like this needs to lay down for a bit. And yeah, it has a lot of backbone, a lot of structure, and so yeah, that's why I think it's Old World and not, you know, not oaked so much to be totally rounded out right now and ready to drink.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say that already hasn't been said? I'll just be harping on the same points. The acidity really brightens up the fruit a lot, makes it nice and red, a little bit tart, kind of getting that, but still very juicy because that 10 ripe vintage is really pretty. This is definitely a very well integrated wine too. It's had some time to kind of, the oak is integrated. It's not layered and separate with each other, but it's very smooth and just very silky all around. The texture is what I like the most about this wine. Yeah, really, really pretty.
I guess one last thing, if I can just point this out. When you're a sommelier, for those of you that are not in the industry, it's probably a good amount of you, one of the things that we take in consideration a lot is, okay, what's our chef doing? How heavy is their hand in seasoning? What's their technique and so on? Is this a wine that you would consider purchasing because it really works well with cuisine and the cuisine of the restaurant and the nature? Does it have a place? And I think for me, and it sounds like we all pretty much would concur that it definitely has that place. The big thing would be, the question is, within its harmony and its components and the way it's showing, what's the cost on it and so on, and making sure that it makes sense because, you know, if this is a very expensive wine, it's great, but does it actually make sense if you're in a seafood restaurant? You know, maybe not. But, you know, if it's steakhouse based, et cetera, and whatever it might be. So that's another big part of the processes that we think about when, you know, does it fit within the scale of what we're doing with our program. So.
Okay, so I think it's time we reveal this. Is that right? I'm waiting with bated breath. I need to know. Yeah? Okay. Here we go.
Oh.
Du Cru Beaucaillou, Bordeaux.
Nice.
Nice. From the left bank, from Saint-Julien. Classic chateau. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Very good. But, I mean, what you said, Paul, there is, you know, traditionally, there's always the old world, new world divide. And the difference between old world is the earthiness and the new world is the fruitiness. But there's, over the last couple years or so, there's been a kind of a change where you find old world wines tasting quite fruity and less mineral, and the New World wines trying to get that, the tannic structure and the acidity. So, yeah.
grape and vintage right, though. So
yeah, so there you go. Right. Cool. That was good.
The tasting notes on this suggest that this is a wine that's good a decade from now and should last 40 to 50 years. 15% natural alcohol, and the suggested retail price on this is $225.
Yowza.
I would have won the Price is Right because I was guessing 225.
Yeah.
Would you still buy it?
Yes. Would I still buy it? Yes.
225. So that's 225 retail. So wholesale, that's like 100 and change. So on the wine list, that's about 300 something. And it's 2010. I probably wouldn't buy it. Now that I know that, because when it comes to Bordeaux, for me, when it comes to Cabernet in a restaurant, or at least the restaurants that we buy for, I think Cabernet is that type of grape that you can age it a really, really long time, and they really become special with age, whether they're from Paso or Napa or Bordeaux. So I'm always trying to provide cool, older wines for the list. And the great thing about wine today, especially Cabernet and Bordeaux, at least, you know, from my point of view, in the market, in the auction market, you can buy great older vintages for the same amount of the current vintage. And it's just a no-brainer for me. Like, I'll buy a 75 True Cru Beaucaillou, which probably costs the same amount as this. And what would you rather see on a wine list? Something with age. So, you know, that's what I would do. I would try to buy it at auction. New York, there's like 20 of them. Yeah, I mean, we are so spoiled with access. You know, you have Sotheby's, Christie's, Acker Merrill, Zacky's, Wally's, Spectrum. Forget about it. Yeah, and that's disrupting the regular distribution chain. Is that we have access to all this stuff, and it's less expensive. A wine 30 years old is less expensive than the current release, right? It's like, okay, what would you rather buy? And you know, that's what I find myself saying, like, shit, I don't need to buy anything from these distributors anymore. I'll just buy it all at auction. Yeah.
To something that when I think of terroir, I think also too of the consumer image and the place for that wine. For Bordeaux, the consumer image is to drink a much older wine. They want that maturity. And being that, as you said, you can have the same price or lower for an 82, an 85, an 86, a 90, it doesn't make sense. When a wine like Du Cru or another classified growth, you're looking for that age to it. Whereas something from the New World, I might be looking for more freshness, more youth to it.
Right. Yes.
Do you buy wine and put it away yourselves for the restaurant to age?
Yeah.
Because that wine, if it's a great vintage, in 30 years will be a lot more than the 200 or so retail it is now.
Right. Yeah.
You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a great question, because, you know, there's also this consideration that's really important to understand. That, like, okay, if I'm going to invest in that, like, I'm given a budget. And so I basically own my sector of that restaurant. And so with my budget, I have to make really smart choices that are good for the business. Obviously, otherwise I'm not going to have a job very long. So it's a great question, because, yes, do you want to lay it down? But then again, you're not going to be able to speed up the maturity of that bottle, so you can't speed up time, right? There's no time machine that I know of. So I guess that's another really important facet, is like, okay, how do you want to lay out the scale again? And again, I'll come back to the type of restaurant. Would I buy this? It depends on the restaurant I'm buying for. It really does. Because although there's a lot of people that like old Bordeaux, I think there's a growing trend of people that also like younger Bordeaux. And with a great vintage like this, and with all the press and so on, it's pushing the demand. You know, you get both sides. So does everybody really like aged Bordeaux? No. And should they? No. So it really depends. I mean, I find that the wine shows and exhibits good balance right now for 2010. It will get better. It'll start to close up, I think, like Jared was mentioning, at some point. But
Then again, you have to weigh the scale of, is this a good decision to buy this, because how long is it going to take me potentially to sell? And a lot of that is just tracking the records historically of what's happened in that restaurant, what type of clientele you get, et cetera. So looking at the scale of demand is really important too. But it's costly to put it away, because if you can't sell it, then that's a couple, $100 out of my budget that, I'm sitting there trying to do something, and then what do I have to do? Compromise my margin on it in order to try to sell it to free up that capital to buy something else? Yeah, there's a lot of things that you weigh in scale.
Yeah, it's financial. I mean, really, you want to get value for the dollar. You want to make money on the money that you're spending, and you want the restaurant to be in business. If you're buying wines that you're not going to serve for 20 years, I doubt that restaurant will be in business much longer. I mean, because the restaurant needs to make money on the wine program. And the fact is as well, how much Bordeaux traditionally, as it gets older, they don't multiply in value the way, say, what Burgundy is doing right now. Burgundy, you buy it. If you bought certain Burgundies 5 years ago, they're worth triple now. And I don't think there's any Bordeaux that is worth triple than what it was 5 years ago. Not even Petrus. No way. So.
Yeah, that's the other thing is. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. Just really quickly, is that with current release and en primeur and everything in Bordeaux, I'm sure a lot of you know about that. It's inflated Bordeaux's demand to a certain degree in certain parts of the world, and diametrically opposed in other markets of the world. So it's kind of a complicated situation you have, because to Paul's point, you can actually, or to Paul's point, I should say earlier, you could find aged Bordeaux and buy it for the same price. Like you can get, finishes from the 80s for basically the same cost as this. It's already ready to drink and so on. So two completely different things you're looking at there. So to Mike's point as well. But yeah.
Well, I just got the text from my sommelier down in Los Angeles. My DRC arrived today. So that's an easy call. You're going to buy that and take that in. I can't lock up $1,200 for 10 years. Yeah. Just can't do it. Just financially makes absolutely no sense. However, I would buy this wine for today. And I think that this is still drinking. I can have this in my restaurant. I can pour this at the table and feel good. The primary fruit is still there. This is drinking very well right now. On a selfish note, I don't want to buy for 10 years later, because I want to have the glory of being at the table when this bottle gets popped. And that's part of the fun of being a sommelier.
Cool. Shall we go to the next?
Yes.
I think, can you hold that question? We'll get into the second one, and then we'll approach it. Okay? Because we want to. Okay. It's going to run fast. Okay, so now we're on number 2. Okay. Is everybody ready? Yeah? Anybody want to start?
I'll go.
Yeah? Okay.
So this one I think is definitely New World. It's spicier, oakier, has more alcohol, softer on the palate, more rounded out, easy to drink right now. The acidity is moderate. The tannins are moderate. Yeah, I think it's New World. I think it's Paso.
Yeah.
Like on the left side of Paso, the
east,
west. The west, sorry.
So the warmer side of Paso.
No,
the cooler side.
The cooler side with the rain shadow effect and all that, because it has more body.
Yeah.
So.
I agree with you 100% on every level. I like the acidity in this wine. There's a freshness to this wine. There's not a heaviness to this wine. It's in balance. The tannins are really soft, which is like a real early drinking style, which I think people will like. It's a restaurant wine. You can serve it to anybody who's looking for a New World Cabernet, and they'll be happy with it. The balance is good. The flavors are good. There's even just a hint of a meatiness to it on the nose that I think is great. Gives it a little complexity. But yeah, easy drinking style.
Go ahead. Pass the mic. All right. I thought that this one was the most chameleon-like of the bunch. This one had the biggest shift for me. I thought when I first nosed through these about 20 minutes ago that this was French. Then definitely changed it up for me. I agree a lot with what Noreen is saying. I get a lot of brambly fruit, some cassis. I think this reminds me of wine from another region, Napa, I believe, not too far away. Napa, yeah. So I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. So the first thing that I really liked and enjoyed about this wine was kind of the shift from number 1 to number 2, because number 1 is so acid-driven and bright and red, and then you move into this one, which is very dark. It almost has like, yeah, to kind of bounce off of that smokiness, almost like a duck sauce kind of deepness going on. And that's something that through tasting yesterday in here was something that I kind of found to be very Paso, was that kind of deep spice that's also linked with the earth as well. So with those two things coming into this wine, I would have to go Paso on this one. Very tasty though. It's great. Drinking well now. Love it.
Yeah, it's a restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And with that complexity, you know, you just start thinking of the things that you could put it with. You're like, can I put this with duck? Absolutely. With some hoisin sauce and some bao buns on the side. No problem. Can I put it with steak? Absolutely. Structure's still there. It's not going to fall down. So having that ability is really, really nice for us in restaurants too.
Yeah, I agree with the majority here. I think it's a Paso Robles wine. The oak is very evident. I think the winemaker has a pretty heavy hand with the oak, but that's in no way a bad thing. You know, I definitely appreciate this wine. It's very velvety. It's floral. The fruit is riper than the first wine. There's a lot of ripe blueberry, plum. It's very delicious. Jared, I don't think it's a Napa Valley wine. I tend to find more cassis with Napa. For myself, it just has this floral, fruity, ripe structure that I find consistent with Napa Valley Cabernet.
Well, I'm definitely not going against the flow this time. I do think Paso too. I think that if you look at the wine, the staining of the tears, and I think that they're going to talk about this more this afternoon. But the phenolics and anthocyanins in this wine are kind of elevated, and to me that this wine has that wow factor. There's so many Cabernets out there at every price point now that you really need that wow factor, and to me this is. I think it does have a little bit more oak, but it's still balanced. This wine is a wine of extremes, but balanced extremes, and to have that kind of next level, you know, it's turned to 11, right? So.
I'm not really, yeah, I'm on the same page too. I found that the tannins overall, though, the oak-based tannins on the finish were a little bit more prevalent. They kind of push up a little bit. Also on the nose, you really get that sweeter tone of not only the sweet tones of oak, like the cardamom and the vanillin and all that, but also you get that kind of a buttermilky kind of tone from the malolactic, but not in a bad way. But the fruit is ripe enough to balance it out, but the alcohol does push a little bit on the finish, so you definitely got a warm, ripe climate here. But it is fleshy, it's ripe, it's soft, it's everything. Contrasting the style of wine number 1. So yeah, I'm with you guys.
Okay, can you hold it for me? Yeah. Okay, here we go. It is Paso. Justin, Isosceles Reserve 2010. 90 Cab, 5 Malbec, 2 Cab Franc, 2 Merlot. Unfiltered.
And 15% alcohol versus the 14 in the first wine, so that once again justifies what we're saying.
Is it 15? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Did anyone have questions before we get into the third wine?
How would this fit into your restaurant set?
This one. I don't know. Do we know what the price is?
Yes, the price is $100 suggested retail.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. So that's like 150, 195. I think, you know what I said earlier, this is a restaurant wine. This is a wine that you can drink now. You know, it works with steak, it works with duck sauce, it works, you know, with charcuterie. It's just, you know, those velvety tannins are really conducive to pairing with a lot of different dishes. So yeah. Yeah, I think I would. Just because it's, you pop and pour, it's ready to go.
And what I can tell you about the vinification is stainless steel, open and closed top tanks, twice daily pump overs, 24 months in 100% new French oak barrels. And our technology is working, the composition is up there and the bottle.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, numero 3.
Thanks.
Olive, there's this worn leather, this smoke, cigar box. I agree with you guys and ladies. I think it is a Napa Valley wine. I think the winemaker probably has a lot of European influence. You know, the oak is well integrated. It's delicious. I think mountain Napa Valley Cabernet as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm a Napa kid. I'm from Napa originally. I grew up in downtown, and one of the really cool things about when you get up into elevations of Napa is the fact that it's not as developed as the valley floor. Valley floor is like, you know, vineyard, vineyard, restaurant, vineyard, vineyard, highway, vineyard, vineyard. And you get up in the mountains and there's a lot more of the local foliage that's there. And those are the things that really get into the wine because they open up and they release their own pollens and their own oils into the air. And those are the things that you find a lot of when you get that mountain fruit, more so than the valley fruit. And then definitely with this big structure that's coming in tanning-wise, always something you get with that higher elevation too. So definitely supports that argument for mountain fruit there.
I think I'm on board with you guys here. I'm definitely getting more of a restrained style, which would lead to mountain fruit, something slightly cooler. I think what really stuck out for me here was with the Bordeaux and one we were talking about it beginning to lock up. I feel like this one is definitely showing more of that secondary, showing more of that structure. It's already got its winter blanket on. This one, I think, is getting ready for the big sleep, going to come out the other side soon. The other two were definitely showing more of their primary notes.
Yeah, sure, just real fast. Yeah. I think one of the things for me, impression-wise on this versus the first two, is the tannin in particular, the skin tannin, like Mike was talking about. This is really astringent and a little gritty. And it's all up front, so if you guys can imagine, like if you've ever had that, almost like, you know, black coffee, black tea, it's like really, you know, tannic. But the tannins are ripe, and they're not like polymerized, so they're not real soft. There's a lot of mineral flavor for me coming out of this, and that tobacco and all that other things that we already mentioned, the savory, a little of that leathery tone and a little olive. But yeah, it just seems like mountain fruit to me from Napa, because the ripeness is there, so if you can imagine that in your mind, more so than even wine number one, and maybe not quite as complex as wine number one on the palate. A little bit of a, you know, transition from the mid palate into the finish, but a lot of flavor. Reminds me of like, you know, Mount Vita or Spring Mountain, you know, Diamond Mountain maybe. So.
Okay, you hold it.
Yep.
We're ready. Bordeaux. Wow.
Cool. Check that out.
That is cool.
Yes.
How funny.
Cool. And another Sommelier Julien, just like wine.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who knew?
What's cool about it is, what's cool about it is this is Léavel Barton. And so compared to Du Groupe Caillou, same area in Bordeaux and Saint-Julien, both second gross, but Léavel Barton is known to be a little bit more modernist in terms of being a Bordeaux producer, and you really see that in the way they make the wine. But yeah, that's very interesting, very cool.
All right. What have we got here? The suggested retail price.
Label Barton.
Okay, sorry. My sheet's out of order. The suggested retail price on that is $155. The tasting notes are not super descriptive, except to say the wine has real potential for 30 to 50 years of longevity. I don't have the composition breakdown on it.
Cool.
Yeah. And that's good, you know, that's the idea. Like, we don't know everything, and, you know, you're tasting on its merit rather than looking at the label, so.
Very ripe vintage, so you really get the intensity, but great wine. Cool. But I agree with Jared. I think this wine is kind of closing in. It's so astringent.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4.
This for me was the outlier of the group. This was the ringer. This was the one that was showing me something that I wasn't having from the others in a pleasant way, in an interesting way. I'm still a little bit confused by it and very, very curious. But it was showing something's different. Something's going on.
No, I completely agree with you. There's definitely something about this wine that makes it stand out from the rest of the wines. There's a restrained quality. I mean, the fruit is ripe, but the winemaker is awesome. You know, I love this wine. For me, this wine speaks to me. I'm going to go on a limb. I think it's Paso Robles. I know the fruit isn't as ripe as the second wine, but I think that's the influence of the winemaker. I think the winemaker and the viticulture team, you know, really had a hand in this vintage, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This seemed like a Paso wine to me as well. But the big difference between 2 and 4 for me is kind of the mouthfeel of it. It's a little bit juicier. It's not quite as massively structured, I think. Although the tannins are definitely there. Tannic structure is big. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of like the last wine, it really kind of sits on your lips right up in the front, gives you a little bit of a pucker. But it does have some dark spices to it that always seem to be very centric to Paso. So that would be what kind of leads me to believe that. So if we're looking at something that's kind of possibly lower elevation, so maybe East Side Paso can do that, or with their flatter kind of landscape, although it is hotter. I don't know. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is I think it's New World. You know, I think it's New World Cabernet. I'm divided between, you know, Sonoma, or Napa, and Paso. I think it's Californian, whatever it is. Dark spices, I like what you said there because I got that. I got oak spice, you know, cardamom, cinnamon, like really prevalent on the nose. The palate I liked a lot. I like the structure of it. I like the minerality of it. Definitely like a rich, structured, amplified style of Cabernet, which is good, while being, you know, not over the top. I appreciate what, you know, the style of wine that it is, because I think it's getting ripe fruit. I think there's ripe fruit in this wine, and it's harnessed very well. I'm in California. I'll say Napa again.
Valley Floor. Very interesting wine because, yeah, like what was already said, it's very different. Tannins are a combination of ripe and intense fruit-based tannins with a lot of oak tannin on the back. So almost like wine number 3 in terms of the tannin structure. It's a little bit astringent, but not unripe. But there's definitely a ripeness here. There's a headiness to the finish, so it seems more New World on the palate, although it has some of the Old World attributes. There's some mineral flavors in this wine. Interesting wine. I'm still kind of torn on the origins, but it seems like, to me, like a you know, more of a classic Napa-style Cabernet to me personally. But again, more like, you know, Rutherford Bench kind of, you know, elevation or something like that. But I don't know. It's a puzzling wine because it's a wine that kind of has differences from the attack into the finish on the wine. But yeah, but reasonably well balanced, yeah.
Yes, I agree. It's from California, New World. I'm going to say Paso, and it definitely has lower acidity than the others and lighter body. So I'm going to say it's from the other side of Paso now. Maybe Paso Robles Highlands, or maybe even Santa Margarita Ranch. I'm not sure. Or Creston. I don't know, but that's where I'm going.
All right.
I actually like the Napa call, and to kind of jump on something you said about wine number 2 and Terrence, you just said about this wine. I think so often we focus on a wine's acidity. We're always talking about tartaric acidity, which is what we feel, what lifts the flavors to it. But especially in an area like here where you have really higher soil pHs, so you get lower or higher amounts of acidity in your wines, we also see that elevated malic acidity. And that malic acid during theoretically in a red wine is turned into lactic acid, which is that creaminess, and I don't get that creaminess to this wine. I think it's super clean. It seems like we keep talking about the winemaker. So if you're in this room and you made this wine, well done. But it is a very clean, very well crafted wine.
Okay. That's a heavy bottle. Right? Oh, Insignia, Napa.
Napa. Homage to Mr. Phelps, who just this last week passed. So.
How did you pour us glasses of this and there's only this much out of it? Well done. No.
Second bottle.
Yeah. And the hits keep coming. All right. 2 more left. Here we go.
Yeah, I found on the nose this was a little bit more, aside from the ripe concentrated fruit, it had a little like dusty, almost filter pad kind of tone, kind of slightly closing the nose down a little bit. But I did get that almost like Milk Duds candies and like sour cream and that almost malolactic little caramel thing, little soy, little saline, little olive. So pretty complex on the mid palate. I found the oak spice to be pretty intense in this wine, and it's pretty heady wine. It's definitely warmth all the way into my chest, which tells me this wine's, the grapes have seen the sun, so to speak, as I like to say. A little bit of bay leaf in the flavor and the finish, a little coffee. So a really complex, well-made wine, structured, very fruit-forward. Reminds me of a New World style wine for sure, and well-made, but certainly has attributes that remind me of Paso. I would call it probably Paso, with the fleshiness of the fruit, the ripeness. All that seems to justify where I would go with it. But again, who knows, right? I'll pass it on.
Yeah, I would agree with him. It's definitely full-bodied, ripe berries, very juicy, dark fruits, for lack of a better word, jammy quality to it. It has more alcohol, and which makes me think it's from a, I think it's from Paso as well. I agree with you in the beginning, how the notes are kind of like toned down, and all I could get was kind of like a perfumey aspect. And I haven't been comparing them to each other, but going back to number 4 from this one, I'm like, wow, how did I get number 4 wrong now? Now do you see how fruity this one is, you know? But yeah, so I'm saying Paso as well.
I think just because I want to go on a tangent, when I used to work in wine retail and when I decided to be a somm, I got a book on food and wine pairing, and it said rule number 1, match similar flavors. I'm like, all right, I got that. Rule number 2, match different flavors. I was like, wait, did you even read rule number 1? But rule number 3 was to focus on textures, and to me, like this wine is all about the textures.
Yeah.
And again, going back to that ML, and with the oak treatment to it, like it's really fun, just sexy textures.
Paso. Yeah, it's a ripe wine. It's, you know, to the point, not quite roasted, but definitely it sees some sun. There's a cassis quality to it. Yeah, it's there. It's juicy. If I could nitpick, I wish it had more acidity, because it's got some heft. And if it had just a little more acidity, it would carry it a little bit better. Because, you know, this is definitely a heavier style than what we've tasted so far.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely, I was getting some cocoa on the nose on this one. As I'd nosed through everyone in the beginning, this was the nose that spoke the most to me, personally. I would definitely agree with you. Modern in style, big, not out of line, not out of balance. They did a good job of pushing the line but not going over it, keeping that black fruit in check. And definitely Cali would have a hard time between Paso and Napa here. But yeah, I enjoy it. I think they did a good job there.
And I think that Jared really hit it with the nose on this one. has a lot of complexity and a lot of depth to it. This is kind of the thing that you can just kind of sit with and just find something new over and over and over again. I definitely have more notes on this nose than any of the other wines so far. So just kind of the sheer depth of it is really nice to just be able to sit with, because there's a lot of wines out there that are very straightforward and linear. This is not that style. So also the tannins, the tannic structure is again very rich, very ripe, very full, oak and grape tannin too. So then you have, like Paul was saying, with the kind of textural component that plays with it also. It's very silky. The body of it is very smooth. You get the ML that kind of rounds everything out. But then you also get, for me, I always had this little textural sensation in my throat coming from the earth that kind of gets caught in there. And that's very Paso to me, that style where that earth really brings a textural component to the wine. So I would go with Paso for that very reason.
I agree with the panel. I believe this wine to be from Paso Robles. You know, like you all said, that ripe fruit, that fig Newton, this wine has seen sun, and that's in no way a bad way. I mean, this wine is absolutely delicious. It's full-bodied. There's a lot of complexity there. I mean, you can keep on smelling and drinking this wine and always finding new flavors. It's a great wine, but I believe it to be from Paso Robles.
Thanks, buddy. And it's Paso. Dow. 74 Cab, 15 Franc, 8 Merlot, 6 Petit Verdot. Soul of a Lion.
Nice job on that.
Yeah.
And I have a suggested retail of $100 for that wine. Did you say it was 22 months in 100% new French oak, and you have the great composition? The vineyard is one of the highest, if not the highest, in Paso, and the elevation is a little over 2,000 feet above sea level.
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for being here. We're on our last wine, and I want to give a round of applause, first of all, to this panel, because they're great, and really had really fun. You guys are great tasters, and you're also quite attractive, so this is a really good panel.
Oh, you.
So let's go to the 6th wine. Okay. I'm a little befuddled by this one. Yeah. It's definitely on the nose, a little vegetal. You know, you get those bell pepper aromas, the pyrazines. And then the palate is quite rich and fleshy and very ripe. Flavors that could traverse Napa to modern Bordeaux to Paso. So there's not, for me, there's not one thing that's saying this is from here. There's a blend of different qualities that you can put in all those 3 areas. So I don't know. If I was forced to guess, I think it's New World. You know, and I don't know. The pyrazines are throwing me off. But isn't that something that was, Paso was known for pyrazines? I don't know. Before? I'm going to say Sonoma Cabernet.
Wow, that Sonoma, that's an interesting call. I'm also befuddled here. This was a strange one. This was kind of funky at first. That nose was a little wild. definitely took a little time to come around. I agree with you with the pyrazines going on there. I'm also getting a little bit of eucalyptus. The palate on this is totally different. It's reminiscent of something, yet not quite familiar. So I'm recognizing something here, but it's not as close as the back of my hand. It's something that I've had before, but I don't know where. The signature on this feels different from the others. But in that befuddlement, I'm enjoying it. I'm liking to play with it and go, I don't know who you are. Yeah, what's your sign, baby?
Yeah, this one, compared to the rest of the wines that we've tasted so far, is wildly different. We have, red fruit, and then we move into black fruit and blue fruit. And this is, if we're keeping with the color theme here, is black and green, which are two things that you don't usually see crossed with this extremity, because it's very green on one side and separate from that, very dark and black on the other side. But yeah, with that said, I mean, yeah, this one's a little more of a conundrum than the rest, I'd say. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an area that's not represented up here right now with any of these bottles at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this wine shows qualities of, Bordeaux, Napa Valley, Paso Robles. There's that pyrazine aspect, the red fruit, the black fruit. However, there is a lot of alcohol. It's one of those things, regardless of the flavors, I can feel that alcohol. It tells me it's a New World wine. For myself, I'd probably put this somewhere in the Napa Valley camp. I couldn't tell you where in Napa Valley, but the alcohol, that ripe fruit, the pyrazines, that's where I'm going.
I'm in the Napa camp as well. I think like more northern, like Santa Elena, Calistoga area. One thing that, there's almost a stemminess to it. And I mean, to be blunt, the price of fruit in the Napa Valley means that you spend more money on other things as well. And I don't think they spend a lot of money on, I think it's a well-crafted wine, but there's definitely some stem inclusion in this wine. I think that's where a lot of that greenness is coming from. And also just that really ripeness to it. I think that, depending on how you judge ripeness, like this had some pretty darn dark seeds when they were pulling the grapes. Like I think some of the tannins are coming from there too. I could see it being Chilean, but I think it's like Napa.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I definitely get all the vegetal notes and a lot of like anise and fennel and licorice and figs. Has a smoky quality to it. I feel like it could be pushed with acidity and tannins and structure and all of that. Yeah, very fleshy, ripe texture. I do think the alcohol is higher, so it would make me think it's down here, but I don't know. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Paso again. And it doesn't have the most acidity, but then it still has a lot of body. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's the Santa Margarita Ranch that I'm trying to understand.
This is the most obvious wine on the flight for me. This is Transylvanian Cabernet from Romania. It's obvious. Yeah. I like what you said, Paul, about the. I even wrote that as well. A little stemminess to the finish and the tannins, which kind of reminds me of like black tea, that type of tone, or maybe from the seeds and so on. But it's interesting. It's almost like the most overripe and underripe wine you'll get at the same time. It's just kind of an interesting contrast. There are certain places in the world that you could see that. Usually it can be elevation related or diurnal shift related, cold nights, warm days, etc. So that could be certainly an environment like, I mean, it seems fleshy and ripe, like New World, and the alcohol justifies that, but that could be places such as Paso Robles. It could be places like Washington State. I could see that. I could see, it's a tricky wine to place, because I agree it's not necessarily fitting a traditional profile of a specific place. Not that's a bad thing. I think the wine is balanced and shows well, but it's pretty intense structurally as well with that alcohol in the finish. It's a ripe wine, but it's interesting that you get those green capsicum, pyrazine tones as well. So pretty interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'd call it Washington. I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Right?
Oh, my God. This makes sense, actually.
Napa Valley.
Yeah.
Dominus. Ooh la la.
Wow.
It's from the family that owns Petrus.
What's wonderful about that is that, that's Dominus. If you know what Dominus is, of course, it's very much in the mold of, Christian Moix and that Bordeaux style, and they've applied that for decades now, and it totally makes sense when you go back to it and think about it, because that's what they're going for, and that's winemaking, conscientious harvesting at a certain time, and all that. But yeah.
Right, but it's also when you think like they have some blocks that are underripe, and they're blending them with blocks that are a little overripe, and putting them together. So yeah, there's definitely a bipolar quality to this wine. Yeah.
It's cool. It's good wine.
Yeah, cool.
So the vineyard is also literally right at the fog line.
Yeah.
Is that right? Paul said the vineyard is right at the fog line in Napa.
Information I have on this is 95% Cabernet Sauvignon, 5% Petit Verdot. I don't have a lot of other tasting notes or tech notes on it, and the suggested retail is $250.
Wow. So is that the most expensive wine? That in the Ducru? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that was great. That was great. None of us made fools of ourselves, so I think for us, we're happy. We did okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if anyone has questions that you want to bring up, sir.
When you tasted number 1 and you rotated it to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what would happen now if we tasted number 1 as number 7?
That's number 7.
Right.
Number 6.
At the end.
If we tasted that, that's it. So you want us to try that?
I would.
Okay.
To see what changes occurred.
Do what?
Retaste number 1.
I poured all my wine into
I think the gist of your question is that what if it was the last wine to taste out of the first? And, sensitivity to setting your palate and all that, absolutely. A lot of times what we do is we'll take a little taste of something to kind of set our palate before we start to analyze. So,
sure.
Yep.
I mean, I think I would still call it as Bordeaux. There's much more. There's a tautness to this wine that a lot of the others didn't have, and the minerality still comes through, and the freshness, the acidity. Yeah, I think I would have the same guess, to be honest with you.
Yeah, not only guess, but I would say that it's showing even a little better now. Yeah, it's opening up more. It's more perfumed and aromatic, which we suggested when we were talking about it and breaking it down, which it's showing, instead of being so kind of intense and almost masculine form, it's got some aromatic, feminine tones coming out now, aromatically anyway. But great structure, more complex on the palate.
I would definitely also call Bordeaux. I've realized over time that I'm an absolutely fantastic blind taster when I know what the wine is. And that helps me a lot. That being said, I would go back to Bordeaux, and maybe in line with the question, which I think was a really great one, thank you for asking that, it feels a little muted now that we've been playing with some bigger guns, and coming back, you have to stick your nose a little further into the glass. Which tells you even more. Which, yeah, then does definitely hammer it home that it is Bordeaux. Yeah. I still do like this wine a lot. I think that Ducru is tasting well, and I stand by my guns. I would bring this on a list.
Yeah, to answer your question, this at the end, I think the biggest, I mean, when you do it comparatively, you're going to look for differences a lot as well. So the biggest difference is just knowing that this is for sure cool climate wine, or much cooler than the rest because of the heightened acidity, the body and the structure of it, and just the way that it feels in your mouth versus the other ones is worlds apart, and geographically worlds apart. So.
Sir.
So I got a question for you that surprised me on wine number 3. I tasted these wines about a week ago, and one of the reasons I picked up on number 3 being Bordeaux is because of the bready character.
Sure.
So I'm wondering why didn't that come into play? Because I thought for sure you're all going to nail this one.
You know, I have to be honest with you. For me, this is one of the things that happens when you blind taste. You're like, okay, we had Bordeaux, we had Paso, so what's next? It's got to be Napa. So I had that kind of frame of mind when I tasted it, and I did get the mentholated character, like the kind of the fresh, phenolic character of the wine that, you know, could be Napa or it could be Bordeaux. So I think this wine is Napa because it should be Napa in the progression of the blind tasting. And oftentimes when you do blind taste, you project. You know, a lot of times people say this, like, shut your mind off and just really taste the wine for what it is rather than what you think it is. Or like, you know, like you blind taste, you go to see a friend in a restaurant and you're looking at his wine list. So then when he gives you a glass, you're like, okay, what is on his wine list that this wine could be? Rather than tasting it for what it is. And I think I may have gotten caught in that. And, you know, I don't have an excuse, but I'm just saying that is a possibility because I played with that idea that it was Bordeaux as well. But I just felt like, okay, it's time for Napa.
Yeah, and one of the other things that you have to multiply that voice in your head saying Napa by 6 other voices as well that are also saying Napa. But it's funny because as I was listening to everybody speak, everybody was speaking about Bordeaux terms. Everyone was talking about the secondary notes that were coming out, not the fruit. Everyone was talking about you know, all the spices, all the other things that are happening, and it wasn't a fruity wine. It wasn't finishing fruity. It was finishing dry, you know, and the notes were right, but the conclusion was off. But if you listen to what everybody else said, everyone was just saying, oh, this is Bordeaux. But then at the end, we switched.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at my notes for number 3, I mean, what I have written down, I have less alcohol, earthier, less fruit, gripping tannins, just medium body, cigar box notes, herbs, graphite, mineral. So, but because we already had a Bordeaux, I'm like, okay, well, let me think of a Napa region that would have this. Yeah.
So mountain fruit. Well, I think the Léoville Barton, it would be interesting if we had another bottle of that same Barton open. I think that this wine is not showing right now. That was another thing we sort of said. It was a little locked up, especially in comparison with the Ducru. This Léoville Barton is, sometimes I say a wine doesn't show up for work that day, and that just might be today, that this is not necessarily, I mean, certainly the Ducru is showing its character, the Barton's being a little shy. Yeah. So that does make it a little more difficult for us to call out its characteristics when they're not there that day.
I think something going over the flight as a whole and the choice of vintage was pretty interesting because we're talking about a pretty cool year here in California and a very ripe, warm year in France. And so I think a lot of the things that you'd normally think of as being California are showing a little bit in the Bordeaux's, that they have a little bit more ripeness to them. And likewise, the California wines are a little bit more restrained than they would normally be.
Sure.
That said, if we had Ducru for wine number 7, I would call it right now, but you know.
I think that's part of it too, is that, yeah, it did come after a very ripe or New World style wine in the Justin Isosceles, which sometimes when you get that on your palate, the transition is there. Now, does it have attributes of producers that can develop wine like that in the New World? Absolutely. But looking at my notes, it's the same thing. And frankly, it's just like, it's also the power of perception as well, and like, you know, influence and so on. Because yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, for me, and I underline this, you know, dusty filter pad, bentonite kind of tones on top of the fruit. So it's a little shut down on the nose. I agree totally with what Jared says, and I think we all said this, but I found it medium plus gritty skin tannins, mineral dust, magnesium, iron, blood kind of tones to the finish and the tannin and with the Brettanomyces. So those types of things showcase, and tobacco and all that as well that I had in there. But all that quintessentially describes Bordeaux, but yeah, but it's also got ripeness of fruit on the attack, so it's almost like it shifts from the beginning into the finish quite a bit. But yes, if you concentrate, and one of the things I guess about blind tasting, if you concentrate on the structure and the finish, what I call lift and fall, a lot of times that can kind of tell you where you're at in the world, or at least where the terroir may be, depending on your winemaking style. You can mask that too. But yeah, that's interesting because Léoville Barton, you compare that to you know, the Ducou Caillou in wine number 1. Very different style of winemaking. Very, very different. So it's interesting, but yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Did you have fun today? Cool. Next time, we want you to drink with us. Yeah. That's what we need to do. Okay? Okay.
Thanks to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you coming out and tasting with us and giving us some information about the great wines that are made here, that they can stand up to anything that's made in Napa or Bordeaux or anywhere else in the world.
I do have one question, actually. That's okay. I'd love to hear from each one of you. Do you feel that all these wines are basically in the same caliber in terms of, you know, really showcasing what Cabernet Sauvignon can?
Absolutely, 100%. And you know, I think about all of these wines that we're able to taste, they are from where they come from. And for me, that is the most important part about wine. Wine that is honest to its origins. And all of these tasted like, maybe with the exception to this was just confusing, because this is more, I think, of winemaking style than terroir. But all of these really have a point of view that is from where they're from. And that's all I want in wine, for better or for worse. If it's like the worst terroir in the world, I want to taste horrible wine, you know? I don't want it to have it, you know, try to be like red Burgundy if it comes from, you know, Madagascar. You know, that for me is boring. But if it takes the terroir from where it's grown, you know, with all the, you know, the great qualities and also the blemishes, then that's a real wine. And I think we had that today. So that was a success from my point of view. Yeah. Yes?
Then on that note, you have these wonderful old world wines, you have these wonderful new world wines, because we've got such great people from great restaurants represented here today. What's your turn rate between higher end new world versus higher end old world wines in your particular restaurants?
That's a great question. I'll tell you right now, for me, the higher end old worlds sell better than the higher end new worlds. And, you know, being in New York City, and a lot of the guests coming in have this European stance that they're looking for. They're looking for red Burgundy. They're looking for Bordeaux. They're looking for Champagne. I mean, we do sell wines of California, but oftentimes they're the Pinots and the Chardonnays that people are looking for. You know, where 10, 15 years ago, it was all about California Cabernet. It was all about Napa Cab. Today, it's, you know, if you're a consumer and you're in your, you know, late 30s, early 40s, you're looking for, you know, Pinot and Chard. I mean, the new California more than anything else. So, yeah, I'd say for the most part, it's the old world, high-end Cabernet-based wines that are selling more than the others.
I think the answer to that question also has to do with where your restaurant's at, because I've been working at Hakkasan in Beverly Hills for the last year and a half. I recently left there, and I'm only at this restaurant now, but no, definitely high-end New World. That's what they're buying. We have the Dominus. We have the 09, which tastes nothing like that, by the way, but yeah, I sell a lot of Insignia. I sell a lot of, you know, the higher-end Justins, and yeah, Opus One, Silver Oak, like people spend money on all of this. But when it comes to the older stuff, you know, they're not sure about the quality. They're not sure, you know, how you have the bottle, where you got it from. You know, they trust in the New World. So, and they'll drop $400 or $500.
I agree with Noreen. Sorry, Paul. You're in Orange County as well. I mean, for my wine list, you know, the majority of it is Californian wine. California Cabernet sells. You know, for every bottle of Bordeaux I sell, I'll sell maybe a case of California Cabernet, whether it's from Paso Robles or Napa Valley. Maybe that's because it's Orange County, but California wines sell tenfold over anything else in the entire world.
For me, and I think there's really two ways to answer that. Now, Cabernet Sauvignon, domestic Cabernet Sauvignon is my #1 best-selling category. However, #2 is Bordeaux from a dollar volume. However, that's not from a bottle volume. So I don't have the breakdown. Like I don't off the top of my head know average bottle prices. But by a large margin, it goes Cab is king, followed by Chard, followed by domestic Pinot. That said, dollar volume is really different. It goes California Cabernet, Bordeaux, Red Burgundy, because things drive it up. You know, $10,000 bottle of Bordeaux shifts your numbers.
Yes.
So what is your takeaway from this experience, both about yourselves, how you taste it, and also what have you learned about this wine and how you perceive it?
I'm happy with the takeaway with everything. I think, everything is positive. I'm enthusiastic about all the wines, that they show a sense of place, and I think they're quite delicious, and they each have a different personality, and they each could be paired with different types of food, even though they are the same grape. So I'm happy there, and I'm fairly happy with myself in this panel and the way we blind tasted. And I think we really, if we missed a wine or two, the overall leading up to the process of us getting there, I think is legitimate. I think we really did the breaking down and the deductive reasoning to get to the point where we were, and it was really the difference was we chose one area that was somewhat similar to another one. So I think all in all, this was a good experience for me. I'm going to sleep really, really well tonight.
I'm maybe going to go back and answer both questions. In regards to what I saw in the restaurant, I'm in downtown Los Angeles, in a very interesting area because we have a lot of people that are coming through and leaving, maybe visiting from other cities. We also have a lot of Angelinos coming through. I myself am kind of as bipolar as that Dominus in that I am originally a New Yorker. I spent half of my career in New York. I've now spent the other half of my career in California. There's a huge difference. In New York is very European-centric on their wines. California is very California-centric, and with good reason. I mean, this is in our backyard. We've got all this great stuff. I didn't understand it when I first got to California, and now I'm embracing it. In fact, I get angry when I go to a restaurant that tells me how they have all, Harry's berries and all this great Central Coast produce and, all these wonderful farms from right here. And then I have a, crappy Pinot Grigio from the Alto Adige, and it's just, if you're refusing to pour California wine, that's fine. You can't have California produce. Get out of here. And my takeaway here is that I've been fond of Paso for a long time. I've been more aware of the Rhone varietals. So this has been much more eye-opening for me. I mean, just the price of the ticket alone is to really learn how well you can be doing cab. Yesterday, from all my colleagues running around and tasting, I think, I speak more for myself, but I think it was echoed, and I was hearing this. We were all really very surprised at not only the quality of the cabs that are coming out of Paso Robles, but the variation. And I'm really interested to dig a little deeper into all these AVAs and find out a little more about what's happening.
Jared Hooper, hashtag Alto Adige hater. Those are good questions. I'll tell you this, because I'm all the way in Las Vegas from LA. Whew, like right in the center of LA, of US, right? No, but being in such a transient and tourist-dominated market, it's so different. I'm from Seattle, so when I was sommelier up there, much more about locals, not as much based on tourism and so on. And depending on the restaurant, you had a local kind of affinity and demand for certain style wines. And it's completely contrasted in Las Vegas, which once again is a little bit contrasted when I've been in LA and so on, or even internationally. So a lot of it just has to do with like your clientele base, your consumer demand. And the more that you can trigger into what that is based off of a little bit of case study in the marketplace and the restaurant, and if you have a historical basis, that helps a lot as a reference. But yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both. That's why I've always tried to tell people, especially in buying, it's a good idea to have something for everyone, unless you're in a marketplace that is really kind of quintessential higher demand for one thing, particularly, or a few things, and not so much for others. But generally speaking, it's a good idea nowadays to have relative balance, because you never know who's going to come in the front door. But yeah, and what did I take away? Just fun. It's fun to taste great wines. I'd like to say thank you for great examples. That's, you know, there's nothing like, I've been on so many panels in the past where it's like, you know, you get everything in between, and it's a lot harder to examine something blind or to be frankly upfront and honest about it, whether it's great or not so great. But this was, yeah, I think a really great flight, and makes it a lot more enjoyable for us to talk about, because if you can't like great wine, then what are you doing? So anyway, I'll pass it on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Thanks for the invitation. I guess I'm used to doing more double blind tastings, and with this being a single blind where we know they're all cabs, it's just more fine tuning of everything. Whereas that makes it harder, you know? It's easier to compare, well, I don't know, this is obviously a Malbec is going to be much different than a Mourvedre or a Cab Franc or, you know, a Beaujolais, whatever. And so you could really compare them all, and it's easier that way. And maybe if I would have compared them all, maybe it would have been easier for me as well. But I think I did a good job, and I really enjoyed all of the wines. The one that's the most expensive was my least favorite. So that brings back what you were saying in the beginning. So yeah, I think definitely, yeah, the Damas. Definitely trust your notes, and you know, the answers are there. So don't get swayed by other opinions, and yeah, and so that's why it's also easier if if people don't talk and you just do it and write it down. But I enjoyed all of the comments.
I think my biggest takeaway is just the variety, that they accomplish different things. That there's a reason why we grow Cabernet in Bordeaux, Napa, and Paso Robles, because I think these are incredibly beautiful expressions of the grape from different areas, but they are not the same. You know, that's the point. And you talked about breadth on a wine program. I think breadth in your own wine cellar, because there's times where I would drink some of these that I wouldn't want to drink other ones. I don't think sitting outside in the summer I'm going to crush a bottle of Leoville Barton or Dominus, but there's a couple that I might enjoy. So I really do think that it is different tools for different jobs.
And I want to say thank you to everybody who's hosted us so far. The hospitality has been amazing, which is great for people on our end, because we actually get to receive it now, which is very few and far between for us. So it just speaks that much more. Everybody in Paso has been really, really nice and kind and open and warm, which is great to see too. You know, it's a lot of fun being here. And thank you to the panel. I think I'm probably the youngest and least experienced taster here, so what I take away is definitely experience. Being able to listen to everybody else, compare that to what I put down, and to just kind of dive a little bit deeper and, you know, dig in a little bit more and try to find that next level too. But that's also the beauty of the wine industry. There's always a new vintage that comes out. There's always a new producer or a new style or a new label from an older producer who has a new idea. And these influences keep the industry fresh, and they keep it growing, and it keeps bringing more people in too. So it's a really wonderful time right now, I think, for the industry as a whole, which kind of links to the last question. We have a lot of new wine drinkers, and it's nice because they're very open. I'm speaking in generalities, but definitely at Spago, we have this polarized community of very traditional old guests that have been coming there for 25 years that only drink Bordeaux's, that bring them from home and have really deep cellars. And then we have a bunch of 20-somethings that are coming in that say, hey, I want to try something new, and that want to do something completely different. So it's great to have Paso on the list and being able to share that with them, and to kind of, you know, teach them the other things other than Northern California Cabernet, you know, and to show them the diversity of California just within itself to go along with their Harry's Berries.
Yeah.
Be nice.
I guess one last thing, and I think, you know, so there's a question over there, so I'll keep this real brief, but one of the other things I think is important to convey is as buyers, as sommeliers, there's a lot of criteria that goes into decision making. We've kind of alluded to some of that earlier, but I think one of the things that's really important, if you're not in the industry, you wonder why the decisions are made, so on, you know, ultimately there's objectivity and subjectivity, right? And this is a world where you've got to balance both sides. And you want to show personality and profile in what you're doing in your list, but you also don't want to do it for the sake of being, too courageous in terms of representing wines that don't have balance and something enjoyable about them for your consumers. And I think that's really a critical point because, again, it's wonderful to explore the world out there and to try these wines and represent them, but if they don't really fit like a puzzle piece within the program, within the restaurant and the environment, then I think in some ways you can easily be doing a disservice professionally to your consumers and your clients coming in the door. A lot of times keeping it simple is better. Making sure you have a fair balance of wines that are high demand, that are appreciated, and then putting in some of those things that personally you feel really work well with the cuisine, or something that you feel is a really unique expression of some particular place you want to venture a journey to for have that opportunity. But that's a really important thing, I think, because a lot of people are not really clear on how do you choose which wines. It's a saturated wine world out there. There's so much available. So yes, you have to be very selective, but you also have to make it fit within that particular place. And I think that's a very, very important part that sometimes gets overlooked. So.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank all of you for sharing the last couple of hours with us to see that Paso really does play on a global stage alongside some of the great Bordeaux producers and regions of the world. And I want to applaud all of you and thank you all from the bottom of my heart for sharing this experience with us here in Paso Robles, and I welcome each of you back at any time.